Starting with my best matches of the tournament, I'll start on the women's side. Honourable mention goes to Alja Tomljanovic versus Simona Halep in the second round. It was either the end of the day session or the start of the night session, and Tomljanovic had match points against Halep, which would have been a huge upset. The number 2 seed crashing out in the second round would have been crazy. Halep did manage to come back. I think Tomljanovic was 5-2 up in the third, if I'm not mistaken, and she did choke a little bit, but fair play to Halep. That was a pretty impressive match. I didn't catch too much of it because I was actually at the tennis for the first 4 days, and this was during that period, so I didn't see this too much, but from what I heard, it was a very impressive match. Tomljanovic played out of her skin, almost came out with a huge scalp. I'm trying not to say but yeah, that was a good match. Then number 3, I'm going to give it to a bit of a strange one. I know one of my mates was there and he was saying it wasn't the highest quality match, but I think it was the third round of the Friday of the first week. Su Wei Shea of Chinese Taipei versus Sara Errani. Shea obviously went on to make the quarterfinals, if I'm not mistaken, and played Osaka. Errani obviously lost if Shea got to the quarterfinals, but this was a 6-4, 2-6, 7-5 epic at the John Cain Arena. Probably, it's the kind of match, if it was on an outside court, I would go watch, but if it's on an arena, I'm probably not going to be picking it to watch on TV, but it was a big battle between these two experienced campaigners. Irani's kind of gone to the wayside in the last few seasons, but she had a pretty impressive tournament after coming through as a qualifier. And then Su Wei Shea, she's always been pretty good in Australia, and she's always been one to upset a big opponent, and she proved herself this tournament with some big scalps, beating like Vondrousova, Irani, and she did go down to the eventual champion as well. So that's my number 3. Pretty good match. Came down to the final set, 7-5. Number 2, I'm going to give it to Aryna Sabalenka and Serena Williams. The fourth round in the women's was probably where the highest quality matches took place, in my opinion. There were some good quarterfinals, but I think the fourth round there were some blockbusters, and this was definitely one of the big ones. It was on the same day as Muguruza versus Osaka. It is probably one of the best Rod Laver Arena schedules I've ever seen, especially in the fourth round. Can't remember who else was on during that day. I think it was Team Dimitrov, which didn't end up being as good as it looked on paper, and not sure who else was on that day, but there were some great matches. But yeah, Sabalenka really pushed Serena Williams. It was an interesting clash of styles, very similar players, big serves, strong forehands, just power players really. They're used to belittling their opponents by just overpowering them, but they're not going to be able to do it to each other as they are so strong themselves. And this match really had ebbs and flows. At certain times it looked like Sabalenka was going to overrun Serena, and then other times it looked like Serena was just going to be too good on the day, which is what ended up happening. Just overpowered her in the third set to bring it home 6-4, but Sabalenka had a barnstorming second set where she won 6-2, so it was a very back and forth match, but some impressive power hitting on display, and yeah, just a really high quality match between two people with interesting styles. So that was one of my favourite matches, but then my favourite match in the women's draw was Muguruza versus Osaka on the same day as I mentioned earlier. Osaka faced, as everyone's been talking about, faced 2 match points, managed to get through it, and obviously went on to win the championship. But Muguruza, she's just so dangerous at the moment with her low ranking relative to how good she is. She needs to really improve that for her own good, but as a viewer, it's providing some pretty interesting matchups early on in tournaments. She's obviously good enough to be making semi-finals and finals at pretty much every slam, but the fact that she is so low ranked means she does have to come up against higher ranked opponents pretty early, and it was unfortunate that both Muguruza and Osaka had to play each other in the fourth round, as one of them had to be eliminated so early, as I do believe they could have both met in the final if the draw was made another way. But yeah, really impressive matchup. Both played really well. Osaka just clutched up when it mattered and just stormed home, as she kind of made a bit of a feature of her game. She tends to win the last 2 games of the match in ridiculous speed, and she just knows when to put the foot on the accelerator, and she really clutched up here. And she quoted that because she was down match points, now she feels like she had nothing to lose for the rest of the tournament. And that could have gone a long way to her winning. On the men's side, my honourable mention is going to go to Tsitsipas and Kokkinakis. Similar to Tomljanovic and Halep, I didn't see much of it because I was there, but this looked like an incredible match. When I saw the schedule, I was like, Kokkinakis can't beat him, but he might be able to, push it to a tiebreaker or something, get the crowd involved. But the fact that he took him to 5 sets, pretty incredible from Kokkinakis. He's had a lot of injury issues, very high quality tennis player. I think at his best, he could be a top 50 player. But Tsitsipas almost got knocked out very early. I think this was only second round. And as the number 5 seed, I think he was number 5, or was he number 6? Oh, I can't. Yeah, no, he was number 5. I think Zverev was number 6. You can't be going out in the second round. And he didn't. He clutched up at the end and went on to have a very impressive tournament. So this was a bit of a sliding doors moment for Tsitsipas. If he goes out in the second round to Kokkinakis, he's coming out as one of the biggest losers of the competition. But now he's coming out as one of the biggest winners. So that's my honourable mention there. In third, I'm going to have Shapovalov versus Sinner. In the first round, similar to Muguruza, this is just a ridiculous standard of match for such an early round in the tournament. I think this will be one of Sinner's last matches, one of his last tournaments ever not being seeded. That's probably excluding like 500s. You get some pretty good 500s where if you're not in the top 15, you're not seeded. But I think he's now ranked 32 or something, so that means he's going to be seeded for Grand Slams, and unless he's playing at some stacked 250 or something like that, he's going to be seeded there, and then he'll probably be seeded in Masters moving forward. So we won't have to worry too much about him coming up against quality players like this in the first round any longer, but poor Shapovalov, you couldn't get a worse first round draw, I don't think, than Jannik Sinner right now. He pushed him the whole way, 5 sets. It was a really entertaining match, especially for the first round. There's usually quite a few 5-set thrillers in the first round, but they're not usually of the highest standard. It's usually in the third, fourth quarterfinals where the standard really begins to lift. But from the outset, these two are playing such high quality tennis, and it's just a shame that Jannik Sinner had to crash out on night 1. But really entertaining match between two young guns and two stars of the future. Number 2, I've got Kyrgios versus Humbert. This was a high quality match, but this is probably more because of the atmosphere, the event it was. Second round matchup, Kyrgios, another guy, like we keep mentioning, Muguruza Sinner, he's a lot better than his ranking suggests. He was unseeded at this Australian Open. Seriously dangerous player to come up against if you are seeded like it was for Humbert. It went to 5 sets, 6-4 in the 5th to Kyrgios. He saved match points in the 4th, I believe. Because he won the second set, so he couldn't have saved them in the 3rd. Humbert played pretty well, to be honest, and I think he might have announced himself a little bit to the Australian public, but Kyrgios was just too good on the night, and the crowd was absolutely pumping. I love that Kyrgios doesn't play at Rod Laver Arena. I personally am not a fan of Rod Laver Arena, especially in the first week, so I'm glad that Kyrgios gives, especially John Cain Arena. Margaret Court's still pretty good because there's some big names that play there and you get some good matches like Shapovalov, Sinner, but John Cain Arena or Hisense Arena or whatever you want to call it, the third arena, often doesn't have too much going for it. Normally it's packaged with the ground passes, so if you go to the outside courts you can watch Hisense Arena or John Cain Arena, but this year due to COVID they zoned it off, so it was his own sort of section, so they're really lucky that Kyrgios opts to play at John Cain Arena because it kind of gave that zone its own, I don't know how to explain it, but he was just basically the headline act for that zone every day or every second day. So he got that place pumping, and then that kind of gets the atmosphere of that court going for other matches as well. So it's very cool that Kyrgios does that, and it's just a really interesting thing to watch. I do think when I watch those matches of Kyrgios, I do think that tennis can suffer sometimes from being a bit too polite, and I think a little bit more of that could be a good thing for tennis, and I think it could involve a lot more of the younger audience. You see it in soccer and even in certain matches in cricket like the Barmy Army. Everyone loves a bit of a rowdy crowd. It always adds to the on-field action, so I think I went to the President's Cup. Normally when you watch golf on TV it's very tame, but at the President's Cup in Australia, it was very loose, a lot of drunk blokes, a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling, a lot of banter, and that really improved the watchability of it at the ground and on TV. So I think tennis, that's something they could work on a little bit, be a little bit looser in terms of the crowd. I know you can't have blokes like screaming at the top of their lungs mid-serve, but I think they should be a little bit looser and just let a little bit more rowdiness go, because it makes it a lot more entertaining spectacle. And Kyrgios brings that to the sport, which is cool. Number 1, Tsitsipas versus Nadal. For me, this is probably the best tennis match I've seen since, probably back in the prime of the Big Four, when you used to be guaranteed like a 5-setter in the semi-finals between any combination of Murray, Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer, even Stan at times. They were really good matches. They would always go deep into the 5th, but this was just such high-quality tennis. I'll be honest, I completely wrote off Tsitsipas from the get-go, and I'm glad he proved me wrong, to be honest. I thought that it was destined for a Nadal-Djokovic final yet again. I was going to be so mad at it, because I, unlike a lot of tennis fans, am not a big fan of the same blokes winning every time. So for Tsitsipas to play at such a high level, and there is a lot of long rallies, which is my preference. I'm not the biggest fan of some of the men's matches we get at the moment, where there's a lot of 5-shot or less rallies because of the big serving. But yeah, there was a lot of good rallies in this, which is what Rafa brings to a tennis match, and Tsitsipas just happened to better him in the big moments, and he won 7-5 in the 5th, which I think was probably the biggest win of his career at this point. I don't know if that's factual or not, but I'm going to claim it. Beating Rafa, not on his favourite surface, but beating him. He did beat him on clay, so maybe that's the best win of his career. But beating Nadal at a Grand Slam in a quarterfinal, allowing him to advance to a semi-final, I think that's a pretty big win for Tsitsipas. And I think he set himself up for a really big year this year. Going to be looking to put pressure on the likes of Medvedev and team in trying to push into that number 3 spot. So yeah, that's for me my favourite match of the tournament. Now,
it's a miracle! Oh yeah! What about that one? Unbelievable! Balotelli, Aguero! Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle.